All right.
Just facing
Thank
right
you,
out
Josh.
here.
Thanks, John, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I think you would agree with me that for people that work in the intersection of crypto and payments, it is an absolute giddy time. If you think about over the last few years, it's been a lot of talk about pilots, theoretical stuff, kind of playing around, and now it seems like product market fit is here. Like people are actually building in this space. And so that's the good news. The bad news, as we've talked about, is actually turning on use cases at scale is hard. The last mile is hard. These difficult edge cases and feature requirements actually make things very difficult to scale. So that's some of what we wanted to talk about. As Josh mentioned at sessions, Stripe had made a lot of product announcements. You guys are starting to build some of these things to address the last mile. So wanted to, if you could share a little bit about some of the product announcements, starting maybe with stablecoin financial accounts and how this is solving some of this last mile challenge.
Yeah, for sure. So stablecoin financial accounts, one of our big launches at sessions this year, is, if you zoom out a little bit, it's a dollar-denominated account available to 101 countries. And what's particularly unique about this product is it's not just the 101 countries Stripe is in today. It's actually 101 net new countries for Stripe. And this account provides sort of two basic capabilities. One is the ability to store dollar-denominated stablecoins for any business in these countries. And the other is access to US and European financial rails to interop with that account. And so if you're a business in Vietnam, and you want to interact, and let's say you're a global SaaS business, right, that you're trying to build. Maybe in the old world, you would have needed to get a corporate presence in America, go and create like a local bank account, get yourself a debit card. Now you can start paying your bills and paying your vendors as you sort of operate with a global workforce and otherwise. With a stablecoin financial account, you don't need to do that anymore. You can just sign up with Stripe, get yourself access to this account, and start operating on dollars, sending payments and receiving payments as well. So pretty amazing.
That's super cool. I mean, it reminds me of sort of like the whole ethos of Stripe, which was to abstract away the complexity, right? So developers, the rat's nest of merchant acquiring and payment processing that you guys sort of abstracted. So to me, that's analogous to one of the challenges, which is interoperability with fiat and crypto. Yep. Another last mile component is sort of on the consumer side, and you guys announced your card issuing solution. So how do I actually use this stuff? So do you want to talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, for sure. So this other product, this is a stablecoin-backed card issuance, and it's built out of a partnership with Visa and Bridge, with one of the most the sort of banner customer that was announced at sessions being Ramp. And the advantage of this is sort of an extension of what we talk about with stablecoin financial accounts, which is, okay, so now you have an account, right, stored in dollar denomination and stablecoins, but you want to be able to spend that globally. So you've already got access to ACH, SEPA, Wire, but you also just want to be able to do what anyone else with a business would do, which is get a credit card, right, and go make corporate purchases and otherwise. And so this partnership allows businesses around the world to do this. We sort of use this container word for all of these things. We use borderless, right? This idea that we're not rolling these things out anymore, one country at a time, right? Stable coins and the infrastructure underneath them allows us to go much more widely global with each iteration of innovation here. And I believe Ramp is initially available in Latin America, where there's a particularly large demand for these dollar-denominated accounts that are then powering credit cards.
Very cool. So we just talked about two last-mile challenges. Yep. Check one, check two. There's a list of probably 100, right? And the lift of building these products is heavy. So I guess two questions. If you think about some of the other messy, kind of last-mile use kind of things, what are some of the other things that are top of mind, maybe for Stripe, but more generally for the industry that we need to think about? And I guess the second part of that is Stripe is not going to build everything, right? This is a developer conference. I think one of the things that is helpful for people to think about is well, what are the things that I could potentially build, right? And we were talking about this last week about how it is a very unique time for people to be building in fintech, given the emergence of crypto. So talk to me a little bit about what some of those other challenging pieces are that new products and businesses could be built.
So these two products actually that I just mentioned, touch on one of these core challenges, which is really the interoperability, right? And I think in the past I've talked a lot about like crypto interoperability, right? Stripe actually has an on-ramp as well, which sort of tries to address this, which are all the different networks, all the different coins, and then even within stablecoins, we sort of have individual coins, like take a USDC, and then we take all the different networks that it's available on. I know you take Solana, right? Take Ethereum, take all of these different networks, and the understanding of that to the types of organizations that are now onboarding into crypto, which are not crypto native organizations, right? These are just global businesses. Abstracting away that complexity starts to become table stakes for these businesses to work. So Stablecoin Financial Accounts tries to do this, right, by interacting with all of these networks and then settling down to sort of a common stablecoin on the back end that can then re-interop on its way back out. But what we look at sort of in the industry today is we sort of see this need for additional innovation, especially at the wallet level, right, in terms of what does it mean to abstract these networks away from the average consumer and the average business. So we're back to the simplicity that you would expect in an interaction. I mean, to be frank, the credit card networks have done a pretty good job of this in the past. If you go travel with your Visa card to most of the developed world at least, your tap to pay experience is not any different just because you're interacting with another country. Maybe the like stretched metaphor is banking in another country might support US dollars, but interacting with that could be difficult, but you tap your credit card and it's not anymore. Yeah. And so I think like bringing that degree of consumer payment simplicity, right, and then like banking simplicity to the world through products, I think it's kind of like been the largest problem for crypto for an awfully long time. And that has not gone away. Yeah. But in solving that, and then through this kind of global access solution that stablecoins is giving us, which is we are kind of all getting comfortable now with using the dollar as that settlement currency. I think we get kind of this combined experience that's going to give us that billion additional people on chain that we're all sort of chasing. You talked a little bit also about what are the other kind of things that need to be built. As we get deeper and deeper into the payment space, a lot of these sort of expected primitives in payments today are not currently available even on the most modern chains. You think about you make a payment today and you expect to have consumer protections, right? Like chargeback protection. The credit itself that's actually being issued, auth and capture. All of these things, today in the kind of global reach that we're experiencing, maybe we don't need them yet, right? Maybe it's actually an advantage to have non-reversible payments in certain countries and with certain consumer groups, but we're rapidly going to get there, right? And the closer our crypto products get, and stablecoins are taking us there, from kind of crypto getting closer and closer to fiat, the more those expectations will stop being afterthoughts and start being table stakes as well.
I was thinking about now that we're in the phase of reality, right? Like I used to do this hyperbolic tweets that would be like, "Hey, Visa, Mastercard costs 3%, stablecoins are free." Easy to try and catch people's attentions. Yeah. But now that we're facing this reality. What do you think that, and maybe it's, there's not like one answer to this, but clearly even stablecoin payments and money moving with stablecoin is not going to be free, but do you think that cost profile is going to start to add up as you actually bring in some of these features and requirements like chargebacks and
I think there's going to be a lot of price finding for a while. I don't think we have a standard yet of what these things ought to cost. Kind of to my earlier point, I think there's a lot of opportunity to bring value add in today, which will kind of contribute to what that cost finding is long-term going to look like. Yeah. For certain transactions where you're really just up against the cost of credit cards, but you don't actually need a lot of those sub-features, right? Like stablecoins as they stand, payments today, sufficient, right? And maybe the price finding is already becoming pretty efficient. But in these more complex use case, I think we're pretty far away from understanding what that price, floor is. And I think we're going to see a lot of variability, mostly based on what are those additional services being offered. I think events like this, I think blockchain is particularly well suited for builders who are creating these sort of replications of what we've seen in the past, but also maybe coming up with unique new primitives. Right? I remember when Kickstarter was getting started, it was really difficult for them to figure out sort of a payment process, for what does it mean for a consumer to use their credit card, for that money to be held by Kickstarter and then only released in certain cases. You know, for a builder on chain, you're probably just imagining smart contracts, and you're like, well, this isn't particularly complicated. But back then, I think it was pretty difficult, right? It was not an out-of-the-box solution. And so, you know, mapping this all back to pricing, you know, in a world where maybe that's out of the box and easy to use, you know, you could probably make that significantly less expensive than what the kind of non-standard solution is today that those types of services are using. But it doesn't have to be $0. Right? I think there's lots of opportunity for businesses to still capture and deliver value that people are more than willing to pay for in those cases.
Yeah, and I think you touched on this a little bit. One of the benefits of building from scratch and crypto and blockchain is modularity, right? So if you can Lego block the right, let's say, cost modules together, you can have a more efficient payment system. Like we were talking about, you know, when you use your credit card to buy a cup of coffee versus to book a cruise line, there are different protections that you would want, right? You want chargeback protections in the case of like a large purchase, but not for a credit card, sorry, for a coffee. But you're sort of, the cost structure is embedded in both, right? And so if you can modularize that, that's cool.
Right. There's like the well-known joke about the receipt for a donut. Right? It's like, here's your receipt, you know, just in case you need to return the donut that I've given you, right? Like perhaps the pricing underneath that, right, of the cost to transact to purchase that donut is a bit incorrect because of the degree of consumer protection we're trying to provide for the donut, right? But, you know, conversely, you know, you might be buying a, you know, prepaying for a service that has only just begun to be delivered or is being delivered and has guarantees tied to it, right? In those cases, perhaps we need more complexities attached to it. But I'm actually pretty excited to learn, you know, what those new primitives are, right? Like when I was at Meta a long time ago, you know, we used to talk about the medium shifting, right? And it took an awfully long time, you know, even in the visual medium era, to figure out kind of this moment of the close-up, right? Being kind of this thing that the visual medium provides that in the past you didn't have access to. And once that was figured out, film started to really work, right? And I think like we have this similar set of questions inside of blockchain, right? What are these kind of killer use cases? And I think today we look at them and they're reasonably becoming clear with stablecoins, right? It's just access to the dollar, right? And then kind of that interoperability access to fiat in terms of being able to operate against dollar economies, and over time, you know, sort of the European economy as well, and then most of the global economies if we start thinking about local stablecoins. But I don't think we've necessarily found it yet, right? Like what are
emergent use cases that are going to
correct. When NFTs happened, we sort of thought maybe we found it, right? For a brief moment, we were like, okay, everything's just going to be like digital item auctions, right? And Open Zeppelin had the standards, and that was wonderful. But what are the equivalent payment standards? We don't have yet.
It's funny. This is sort of a good intro to the next speaker is Huma Finance, who they use stablecoins for pre-funding transactions, right? So you could do things like merchant instant settlement at the point of authorization. So you swipe your card and the merchant gets their funding, you know, in 5 minutes. And Huma can power, you know, stablecoins can power that.
Yes.
So
like much more creative settlement solutions, you know, is something that like will need to exist to enable these new payment use cases.
Cool. Well, we're out of time, but thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks.